Welcome to the Weather Woman Podcast.
Welcome back to the Weather Woman Podcast with your host, Michael Weathers. I know I'm by myself this time. I'm currently doing this podcast on a Wednesday, May 19th at 3:16, John 3:16. Anyways, I did that today. That was what I did productive-wise. You can't really see it, but it's a Tasmanian devil with WWP in it, which is Weather Woman Podcast. So, because I left my other artwork back at my apartment in Augusta, gotta have some artwork on the wall here. Okay, so today I just wanted to talk to you about my favorite podcast that I listen to, like literally every time they post, and most of the time I wait until I have a run or a bike ride to do. I'll listen to them just because it gets me through my workouts. So I have a list of 10 podcasts that I listen to. Okay, so we're going to go through it. I am screen recording. You'll probably see me in the bottom right of the screen. Bottom left. Either one's fine. Okay. So, podcast topics, here we go. The first one, I listed them right here, but we're gonna go down to the bold print. First one is Enjoying Everyday Life with Joyce Meyer. Okay, so I would always listen to these on Sunday long runs because Church of the Sunday Long Run, and it's just basically her preaching from the Bible, Christian Bible, and or the Holy Bible. I mean, it's the same thing, but you got it. All right. I do not have really any favorite episode. Where'd Joyce go? Okay, Joyce is supposed to be here. Okay, so here's her YouTube channel, Joyce Meyer's Ministry. I used to say Joyce Myers. I think it's because my last name's Weathers, not Weather, and I just put an S on there. But it's Joyce Meyer. I look up to her. I love women in ministry. I think that there should be more. I do think God will call upon any vessel to preach His word, not just a man. I know I sound feminist for that, but it's true. I just think that God can work through anybody. So, yeah, I listen to her. I don't really have any favorite episodes. I mainly listen to her on Apple Podcasts. But like right here is Pursuing Holiness, the Deception of Compromise, Avoiding Deception. These are just like the audio versions. You could do a Talk It Out. She has a podcast with a couple other women in ministry and whatnot. But yeah, I mostly just listen to the audio version on Apple Podcasts when I'm running. Okay. Second is the Whitney Cummings Good For You podcast. Okay, so this is the podcast that really got me into other podcasts, because you'll see a trend here, because I love her energy, and she's a comedian, so I kind of went down that path, as you'll see, with just comedians and their podcasts. I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience podcast before, and I enjoyed it, but not. It was a lot. It was a lot of manly, mushroomy, alien-y content. So I just kind of got out of that when he switched over to Spotify. I still listen to Whitney, but I used to listen to her a lot more. So let's just go to her. So here's the Whitney Cummings. It's called Good For You podcast. She has 303K subscribers. She just posted one an hour ago. Some of these, like I said, I listen on Apple Podcasts, so that's why it says I didn't watch it, because I don't always watch it. Sometimes I do, like treadmills, I do watch the video. Let's see, what's my favorite? I didn't put a favorite episode for that one, but Nicole Byer was probably one of my favorite ones. I've watched that one twice. She's hilarious. I don't know if you know her. She's also another comedian, but she's an actress. She's just hilarious in general. Busy Phillips, you may know her from White Chicks. She played as one of the girl best friends of... Sorry, something fell. Of, what are the two things? Brittany and Tiffany Wilson, the White Chicks. Yeah, and Andrew Schultz, he's another comedian. He's been on the podcast twice, and I love their dynamic. I like to listen, watch. I did both. I think I listened to the first podcast and watched the second one with him in it. Her recent ones have been pretty good. I mean, Topher Grace, that was a great podcast. They've been friends for a long time, and it's just cool to see and hear like their history and them just talking like normal people. Like, they're not being interviewed, they're just talking as friends would talk, and you see them in another light and not in a way that they're perceived by everybody, which isn't just an actor or actress. Paris Hilton, it was okay. Paris, she just seems very reserved to me. Anyways, let's go on to the third podcast. Okay, so Zane and Heath, Unfiltered, absolutely one of my favorite podcasts. I love it. They're on their second season of podcast episodes. They go by seasons. Their first season, I found them probably like close to the end of their first season, so I had to watch a lot to catch up. But what I wrote here was, these fellas just have good energy. I love their friendship and their balancing vibes. They definitely balance each other out, and I love that about them. They've been lifelong friends since like high school, and they just have such good vibes and good energy. Always, they're just always full of I don't know the word. They're just full of fun energy. That's pretty much it. So I accidentally clicked on their YouTube channel a bunch, the tab, but my favorite episode with them would have to be probably Tana Mojo. That one she's just full of drama and so funny to watch. I have nothing against her. I just think she's hilarious, and she's a great entertainer, and her persona is pretty entertaining in general. But close second, possibly the first favorite one, Tana Mojo would be probably second to this, is Brittany Broski. That one was hilarious. Brittany Broski is known for her was it TikTok? I think it was her TikTok where she was known as the Kabucha girl, that shrink. But I think she goes beyond just the Kabucha girl. She's hilarious and everything. So, but I did like this Stas episode. That one was great. Got to really see her. Burp. Just got to see her in a new light. She's Kylie Jenner's best friends, one of her best friends, but I think she's like the main one. I watched that one twice. Very interesting. Their dynamic, because her and Zane had like a little fling there for a little bit, so it's just interesting to see their chemistry on screen and just to hear some of their stories together. But yeah, I would recommend starting from the beginning with these guys just to be caught up with all their stories, because they reference a lot from past stories they've told. And yeah, season 1 is more of stories that they just tell they've been through life experiences, and the second season is when they bring on guests and start interviewing them, but in a more casual interview way. So my fourth favorite is TigerBelly with Bobby Lee. So here's the trend of comedians. So he's a comedian. He brings on other comedians, which are his friends, because he's been in comedy since the 90s, I believe. And yeah, he's hilarious. Let me just bring up his. So yeah, I'm currently listening to the newest podcast. I don't really know Chris that well, but I will listen to podcasts he goes on, because he's been on numerous podcasts that I listen to. But my favorite one out of the TigerBelly episode would possibly be David Spade. He is just hilarious. If you know David Spade, Joe Dirt, that's probably one of his most iconic roles. He is hilarious. Check out that interview on TigerBelly. Basically, Bobby goes through life stories with the other comedian that he brings on. They basically just talk about stuff they've experienced together, and they make it super funny, and it's always funny. And they laugh at each other the whole time, and I love their humor. Okay, so the fifth podcast is a new one, but it's called Bloodbath. So let me go back to TigerBelly really quick. TigerBelly is him, Bobby Lee, and his girlfriend of like 8 years, 10 years, a long time. They're girlfriend and boyfriend, but her name is Kalila, and she's very, very beautiful. She's also very funny. She balances Bobby out very, very well. Their dynamic is just funny, and you can just tell they're good for each other. So Bloodbath is my new favorite podcast. They just started it. It's with Kalila, Annie Letterman, and Esther Povinsky. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but two other comedians. Annie and Esther are comedians, and Kalila is the girlfriend to Bobby Lee, which is a comedian. So she's got the trademark of the comedian. The only thing about this podcast, I've listened to it today on my bike ride, actually. It's very sexual, but they are very casual and funny about it. My favorite episodes, like I said, they don't have but 14. My favorite episodes would probably be when they're outside and they're shooting the podcast. I just love the scenery. There's really no other reason for that. But they talk about some pretty gruesome sexual things, and there's a lot of probably triggering things in there about sexual assaults and the R word and stuff like that. But they make it so fun. That sounded bad. They make it humorous. They make their past struggles relatable, and they make it not such a harsh thing to talk about. And because I know that a lot of people struggle with that stuff, and they just are like, they just let people know that they're not alone with their struggles, and that everyone's got problems. And yeah, I think they're hilarious, and should check them out. Annie Letterman and Esther, by the way, have a podcast of their own. Like, Annie has her own podcast, Esther has her own podcast, but I just like the three together. A lot of people like it. It's called Bloodbath, but they're thinking about changing their name to Blood Honey. They don't really like the name, but a lot of people in the comments love the name Bloodbath and really wish that they wouldn't change it, but I think they're going to change it because they don't really like it. But I just, you have to check them out because Esther, she's the baby of the group. She's like the innocent one. Annie's like the hardcore, I've tried everything, rockster. And Kalila is the, I've done everything that is weird, but to me it's not weird one. And it's just, it's great. Okay, so my sixth one is Mayim Bialik's Breakdown Podcast. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. Wow. She is great. Okay, so she is a neuroscientist, actress, phenomenon of a person. I love her. She's just great. You may know her from The Big Bang Theory. She does these... She basically... Okay, so this is how she does it. Okay, let me go to my notes real quick. She basically says that she breaks down whatever breaks you down mentally. So she breaks down what breaks you down. She breaks down your struggles and neuroscience-y way, and it's just very enlightening to hear people go from strong, almost overwhelming struggles in their life and overcoming them and just telling us how they did it. And I think it's very profound and just awesome to hear. I love hearing stories like that. So my two favorite would be the most, I mean, not the most new. I listened to this one, I finished it today. Moshi Kasher. I don't know how to pronounce things, sorry. His life story is phenomenal. I would recommend that 110%. Hayley Williams from the band Paramore, and as an independent singer now, she just, I listened to her on my runs the last couple of days. Mind Body Breakthroughs. She just walks us through her struggles, and she makes it so relatable. Her and Mayim and Jonathan, who's Mayim's co-host on the show, they just talk about how the mind and the body are so connected, and that that everyone has these struggles and no one really talks about them, and it's just a great podcast to relate to and help to understand that you're not that weird. It's okay. These struggles you're going through are normal and you'll get through them. And I just love this podcast. So check it out. Okay, so Frenemies with Trisha and Ethan. So this is the H3 podcast. It's on there. The Frenemies. He just started this. Their latest podcast was posted one day ago, and it's episode 36. This podcast is fast talking, which Trish is pretty known for. Ethan is very intelligent, and he knows how to really talk about the drama in a rational way. And what I wrote for this was that it's very entertaining and it keeps you up to speed on pop culture drama, which is very true. They talk about pop culture, and if you feel like you don't know what's going on in the world of pop culture, they will keep you up to date and let you know every bad and good person in it. My favorite podcast of theirs is really any of them, I said. But they do cosplay when they do these. Most of the time they do cosplay, not all the time, as you can see. But my favorite one would probably be The Mask. So, number 32. Because he's dressed up like The Mask, that movie. And she's dressed up as Cameron Diaz in that movie as well. I love it. I love the energy they put into that. It's a lot, so be prepared. Number 8 is the HoneyDew podcast with Ryan Stickler. Sickler, not Stickler. Okay, so, wow. Okay, I found him. He's another comedian. I found him just randomly one day because, like I said, I go through a lot of comedians' podcasts. And, it shows up recommendations. And I just stumbled upon him. And I fell in love with how he runs his podcast. So what I wrote here was he talks about people's struggles and adds a funny flavor to it. And Jessime, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I'll show you guys, is my favorite episode. That's the one that really got me hooked. He basically talks about people's struggles, how they got to be the person they are today, what they went through, and how it has developed them as a person. Okay, so he has 95.7K, which isn't a lot, but he's pretty. You should listen to his story. He's got a story in himself. I forget where I listened to him, but I listened to him on somebody else's podcast, and they were interviewing him, and his story is heartbreaking and remarkable at the same time that he is such a light of a person himself. Okay, so it is episode HoneyDew podcast number 85. Really, they made such a horrible story that Jessime told about her life in such a funny way. They told it in such a funny way that you're just like, I shouldn't be laughing at this. They shouldn't be laughing at this. But they made it where it's okay to laugh at sad things. And I just really thought that was a great way to go about it. So, yeah, check out his podcast. Recommend it. It's great. Number 9, I don't listen to as much, and I didn't even write anything for, but it's This Past Weekend with Theo Vaughn. So, he's another comedian, of course, and he is just the bluntest, hilarious person you'll ever listen talk. Ever. He talks and he just spitballs anything that comes to his mind, and it's always hilarious. And then the person just gets caught up in their own laughter because of something he says, and he just keeps going with it, and he's like, what are you laughing at? He doesn't even realize that he's that funny. I think he realizes, but I don't think he truly understands how funny he is. I listened to episode 336 on Apple Podcasts. If you want to, this is because Kalila's in it from the TigerBelly and Bloodbath podcast. Basically the whole podcast is him flirting with Kalila and essentially seeing what his chances are if Bobby Lee were ever to disappear from the picture of their relationship. So yeah, but I like his old studio. His older podcasts were my favorite. I haven't watched all of them, of course, because he has a lot of them. But good one is pretty much any one of these, I would say. Chelsea Lynn is hilarious. She's a social media comedian. Trailer Trash Tammy is what she goes by. That's her character name. But I listen to the ones with Bobby Lee in them all the time. He's had Bobby Lee on there a bunch of times, and them two together are just hysterical. I recommend it. You would be laughing the whole time. Okay, so check him out. And this one I just got into because they just started their podcast, and it's called, I only listen to the audio because it is an audio only podcast. It's called The Bald and the Beautiful. So it's my two favorite drag queens being themselves, and they bring on guests that are just like them. And it's hilarious. My favorite episode would be Brittany Broski when they bring her on. Okay. So I just finished actually on my walk today. The one with Chelsea Handler on there. She's a comedian. Had her own talk show. Late night. Is it Late Night with Chelsea Handler? I don't know. I never watched it, but I'm sure you know her. But yeah, it's. I don't know if you know Trixie and Katya, which are the two that host this podcast, but they are the funniest two people together ever. They're drag queens, and they're just queens in general. Like, they're so funny, and they're just fabulous. But right here, Bug-Eyed TikTok, B-word, with Brittany Broski. That one is hilarious. I listened to that on Apple Podcasts. As you can see, I listened on my computer halfway, and then I listened on Apple Podcasts halfway. So, yeah, please listen to their podcasts. They're just so funny. They're so funny. So that is all for... Okay, sorry. So that is all for today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed. I really hope you take a look into these podcasts. They're my absolute favorite. I love listening to them, especially when I'm being, athletic or something. And sometimes I just have one playing in the background where I just, subconsciously, hear it, but not really. But I do, you know what I mean? I listen to it. I'm also doing other things. I really don't like ambient sounds, so podcast is perfect for me. But please, just go check these out. I hope that you laugh with them just as much as I laugh with them. The reason why I made this podcast about these podcasts is because I don't have anyone to talk to about my favorite podcasts. Nobody listens to podcasts that I know of, and I just wish that sometimes I could be like, hey, I listened to the Zane and Heath Unfiltered podcast today, and oh my god, that episode was hilarious, and I just want to talk about it with somebody, but I can't because no one listens to it, because they're like, 2 hours? No, thank you. And I'm like, but you'll watch a movie, or you'll watch 10 episodes of a TV show. It's the same thing, but it's real life, and it's real people, and I just really love that. So thank you for listening to my podcast today. I will have guests on this coming week. I have a list of people that I'm bringing on. It's going to be family, of course. Hang on. Okay, so guest on the WWP, the Weather Woman Podcast. My theme is interviewing undercover extraordinary people. So the theme is that ordinary looking extraordinary people. So I will be interviewing a series of people that anybody, I think everyone has a story, and I just want to give them a voice. So I'm going to interview them. We're going to talk about a lot of things, a lot of fun things. So yeah, float through, my dudes. Love you guys. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings.